It's been more than 2 years since voters legalized the sale of recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, but so far, Boston has yet to see the opening of its first pot shop. There have been several proposals, mostly for neighborhood commercial centers, and many questions about safety, quality of life, and opportunities for people most adversely affected by the war on drugs. To tell us about a meeting on what this could mean for the commercial center in Dorchester and Roxbury is the executive director of Greater Grove Hall Main Streets, Ed Gaskin.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being with us, Ed.
Thank you.
Grove Hall, this is the area where people were recently battling against a liquor store. You've got a high school that's almost right in the middle of Grove Hall. So a pot shop, I mean, is there people going to be watching this tonight and they're going to say, are they really going to have a pot shop there?
Well, that's not my decision, but that's part of the reason why we need to have the community discussion. I don't think the community understands or what are the opportunities they have to influence the process. So this is almost like a community 101 discussion on the cannabis industry so that you know where in the process you can intervene or have some influence.
What kind of things are people usually concerned about that they can actually control?
Well, that's a good question, because usually the focus is typically around on the safety of the store and, you know, the police detail, the traffic, the parking, congestion, and almost none of those things, in other words, like whoever's putting in the shop has to try to put some kind of mitigation plan in. But even if the plan doesn't work, it doesn't stop them from getting their host agreement or whatever. I think in a larger scale, there's everything from like right now, if you're caught driving with a DUI, they have a breathalyzer test. They don't have the equivalent for like marijuana. So literally almost every aspect of this whole industry is up for grabs in terms of people trying to think it through and what the solutions are.
Well, one thing that we've heard about with some pot shops in the state already is traffic congestion. You have congestion in Grove Hall, at least during peak hours, and maybe limits on where people can park. So I guess that's something people might want to address.
But see, addressing it isn't the same thing as preventing it from being able to open. It's almost as though they're unstoppable in their ability to open in the community.
What about the community getting some benefit from a pot shop operation, if there is one in Grove Hall? Because, you know, right now people have been predicting and warning and saying that this is an industry that's going to be dominated by big corporations, and the people who struggle with the war against drugs, they're going to get nothing.
Well, again, that there's a range of stuff that people talk about. So sometimes they'll say, oh, the jobs in the industry from cultivating to working in stores pay above minimum wage. Maybe they have benefits, or maybe they're going to have diversity in hiring. There's some discussion now about whether they should be co-ops so that different kinds of groups can come together to own them. You know, one of my Main Street colleagues, they were able to negotiate getting the cannabis place to support putting a farmer's market in, a beautification program. But what I said when I was talking about that, I said, you know, to pay somebody to be a farmer's market manager, you know, let's say 9 to 12 on Saturday, is hardly a windfall to the community. I mean, one of the things is saying, you know, just like I think there's like a 3% that's supposed to come back to the city or the neighborhood or whatever, and it goes into the city's general fund. And I've said, geez, why don't we track that the same way we do for the Community Preservation Act money and have like a separate pool that we can then say, okay, this has to come back to the same neighborhoods in which it was generated and for the benefit of that particular community.
What have you been hearing from business owners around Grove Hall? I know they might be worried about traffic, but, you know, anything that brings more people into Grove Hall, that might have some appeal, wouldn't it?
Well, it depends on which side of the fence you're on, right? So if you, so people would say, well, let's say, for instance, there's a location that's sort of like in the Grove Hall Business District. So some people jokingly say, well, maybe the eating establishments will do better as a result of that. But I think you just have to understand that there might be these cannabis cafes. There might be delivery, just like you have pizza delivery, and nobody has figured out what all the regulations are for all this is. It's just that new. And again, I think that's why you want to say, what are the issues and how can we have some kind of influence on them?
This has been the news, and we're talking with Ed Gaskin from the Greater Grove Hall Main Streets program. Ed, another thing that's planned for this meeting is a presentation by the Roxbury District City Councilor Kim Janey about some ideas that she has. Anything you can tell us about that?
Well, I think so one of the things she's talking about is, for instance, the smaller businesses have a hard time even participating, right? So the way the legislation was written, I think it's supposed to favor, let's like minorities or people who are disproportionately affected on the war on drugs or the rest, or disadvantaged areas. But because it's not legal, sort of like nationally, then banks aren't going to make a business loan to start this kind of business. So therefore, who are the kind of people that have at least $1 million to start one of these businesses? And it's not normally a local neighborhood resident that might have been affected by the war on drugs, and this was designed to help them. So therefore, it's most likely money that's coming from someplace else, or people that have that kind of money, which are not likely to be the people in that area. So one of the things he was talking about is just, how do you make that whole process more fair?
And I think what's also interesting, I think one of her other ideas is to have more disclosure, so you really know who's running these organizations as opposed to just seeing who they send to a community meeting.
Well, that's true. So for instance, I don't want to say like you have the front person, but most likely, let's say if you have the president or the founder or whatever, that person may or may not be the investor or the money that's behind that person to make that possible. So for example, right now in the process, it just coincidentally seems as though all of our former politicians are the furthest along the process. So Andrea Campbell, I'm sorry, not our former sheriff and public safety person. So she, yes, in terms of her getting a license, Tito Jackson getting a marijuana, the medical marijuana one, and there's another one, I can't remember, but the people who are the insiders, have some collections, at least seem to have gotten the furthest in the process.
We should finally let our viewers know about the time and place of the meeting.
Yeah, so we're going to do that Thursday at Freedom House from 6 to 8 o'clock. What we'll do is we'll have, I'll talk for a few minutes, we'll have a presentation on the industry, so the ins and outs of the industry, and then Counselor Kim Janey will talk about her proposal, take questions and answers, and what I would like to do is really get the questions and concerns that people there have, and then see if we can't get them back to either at the state level with the Cannabis Commission, the city level with the emerging industries, getting to our city health, so we can start getting some answers back into the community for all the concerns that we have.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Ed Gaskin from Greater Grove Hall Main Streets.